So this is a good topic for December, the Battle of Stones River, or Murfreesboro, as the Confederates called it. This was a really important battle in Middle Tennessee, and it's kind of overlooked today, but I'll talk about how the battle unfolded, why it's important. Stones River happens at a time when things are not going well for the North. They've been defeated in Fredericksburg, here in Virginia, and they have a major defeat in Vicksburg. And then the Battle of Stones River happens. So it's a very crucial time. People in the North are very anxious, and Lincoln's very anxious to see what happens in Tennessee. So this is the situation in Middle Tennessee, as they call it. And I know it may be hard to read the map. That's Asheville in the upper left corner, state capital. It's been occupied by Union troops since the spring of 1862. And in the lower right corner is Murfreesboro, which is the geographic center of Tennessee. There's actually a monument there that says this is the very middle of Tennessee. They're about 30 miles apart, and today people commute between the two of them. But at this time, 30 miles is a good distance. The Union Army is going to start moving south from Asheville towards Murfreesboro, which is where the Confederate Army has gathered. So this is your Confederate lineup. Confederate Army of Tennessee. This is the major army in the West for the Confederacy. And the commander is General Braxton Bragg, up on top there. Bragg was a good organizer, but maybe not the best at getting along with people. He served in the Mexican War. He had a lot of experience, but in the Army back during the Mexican War, he was called the most cantankerous man in the Army. Not easy to get along with. His commanders, from left to right, we have General William Hardee, who wrote the manual for the U.S. Army. Very experienced. In the middle, on the bottom, is General Polk, the Episcopal Bishop of Louisiana. And on the right is General John Breckinridge, former Vice President. So these three men are his commanders. They're all very well connected politically. They're all very important men, have a lot of important contacts. Let's look at the Union Army here. It's the Army of the Cumberland, which is an army we don't often hear much about. The Army of the Cumberland is commanded by General William Rosecrans, on top there, from Ohio. And his commanders on the bottom, on the left is George Thomas, Virginia. In the middle is General Alexander McCook. Not very well thought of by some of his officers. Behind his back, they called him a chucklehead. And in the lower right is General Thomas Crittenden. And if you've not heard much about Crittenden and McCook, it's because they don't last too long after this battle. The opposing forces, one of the things that's really interesting about this battle is the opposing forces are almost equal in size, which is a real rarity. There's 43,000 Union and 37,000 Confederates. And if you can do the math, that's a difference of 6,000. And it had just so happened that before the battle, the Confederate Army of Tennessee transferred 6,000 troops to Mississippi. So the big what-if question is, what if they hadn't done that? What if they kept those 6,000 men in Tennessee? They could have been used here in the battle, and two sides would have been exactly even in number. But they are close. So, as the Union Army advances down toward Murfreesboro, it's late December, and they arrive on December 30th outside of Murfreesboro. You can see kind of running through the middle of the picture there is the Stones River. The terrain here is very flat. farmland, but a lot of cedar trees, very wooded in places. The Confederate Army under General Bragg is deployed on both sides of the river. You can see that in red, and the Union Army in blue is on the left there. As the two sides close in on each other and settle down for the night of December 30th, the bands of both armies start to play. And this is, again, something really unique to this battle. The two bands will kind of duel and go back and forth, but then as things wind down, both bands will play Home Sweet Home. And one Confederate soldier said that it was soul-stirring. Another Confederate soldier, William Worsham, from the 19th Tennessee, wrote that thick cedars and boulders seem to cast a double mantle of dreariness over everything. It's going to be a cold, dark night. Now, ironically, something else that makes this battle unique, both commanders have the exact same battle plan. And that plan is to attack on the left, their left, which would be the enemy's right. So that means General Rosecrans, and you can see that arrow coming across the river there, he's going to send his attack column across the river, hit the Confederates, and Bragg is going to want to hit the Union on the other side. And if that had happened at the same time, the armies might have just done a big swing. But the Confederates struck an hour earlier, right at dawn. And this shows the first phase of the battle at dawn on December 31st. Now, when I gave tours of the battlefield, I did work here, lived in Murfreesboro. A lot of the battlefield is not preserved. If you've been there, you know the park is very small. I always start my battlefield tour at a gas station because that's where the battle started. Today, it's all developed. But if you look at the map on the bottom, you see General Hardee. His troops are going to make the first attack right at dawn. These are going to be Confederates from Arkansas and Texas, and they catch the Union totally off guard, totally unprepared. And they're very easily going to overrun these guys and start to push them back. A soldier from Texas wrote, "Many of the Yanks were either killed or retreated in their night clothes. We found a caisson with the horses still attached, lodged against a tree, and other evidence of their confusion. The Yanks tried to make a stand wherever they could find shelter of any kind. All along our route, we captured prisoners." So the attack gets off to a great start for the Confederates. Overrun the Union, start to push them back. When that happens, General Rosecrans is starting to direct his attack on the other side of the battlefield, up at the top there. And it's going to take him a while to realize that the Confederates are attacking him on the other side of the battlefield. So at first, the Union's going to be slow to respond. But eventually, Rosecrans is going to have to turn everybody around who's up at the top part of the battlefield and get them moving down to the other side to help stabilize his right flank where McCook is. Now, watch the maps here. This is a couple hours later. The Confederates have crushed the Union right flank and are pushing it back. And they're pushing the Union troops together. In the very middle there, where you see the word Thomas, you see the Union troops are getting sort of squished together into a tight space. And the Confederates are starting to surround them on three sides. At this point, Union forces are going to make a stand in the cedars, in the woods. Very heavy fighting. Sam Watkins of the 1st Tennessee wrote, "I cannot remember now or ever seeing more dead men, horses, and captured cannon all jumbled together." After about an hour in this position, one of the unit commanders, General Dunkerly, and you might not be able to make out his name, but he's right there about in the middle of the picture. General Dunkerly realizes that we're getting surrounded. And he says, we are almost surrounded and we must cut our way out with fire if necessary. We commenced our retreat in perfect order, loading and firing as we went through the cedars, which were very thick. Just to give you an idea, have some of you been to Stone River? Nobody? All right, well, here it is. Look at that terrain. Look at those rocks. This is a great place if you want to make a stand. You know, you got some cover, you can hide in those rocks. But if you're trying to get out, it's a problem. And imagine cannons, horses, trying to move through this terrain. This area gets called the slaughter pen. You know, every battlefield has landmarks like, you know, the wheat field, the peach orchard, Sunken Road, that kind of thing. Stones River has the slaughter pen. Very heavy fighting here, and the Confederates finally overrun this position. I want to go back to the map for a second because in the meantime, while the infantry is fighting in the center there, on the far left, you might be able to make out there's some Confederate troops in red moving up along the edge of the battlefield. That is the Confederate cavalry. And they're commanded by General John Wharton. And their job is to move along and get around and behind the Union Army to try to disrupt things in the rear and capture the Union supplies. And the Union only has one road. They come down the Nashville Pike. And that road is their only line of supply or reinforcement or retreat. So the Confederate cavalry is trying to get behind the Union Army and capture those supplies, capture that road. The man on the upper left there is Gates Thurston. He's a captain, and he is having a bad day because he commands a 2-mile-long wagon train. He's got 75 guards for that wagon train. It's full of ammunition and supplies, and the Confederate cavalry is coming, closing in on him. So what Thurston does is he starts to lead this wagon train down country roads and cutting across fields, just trying to get it out of the way, stay ahead of the Confederates. And the man on the right is the commander of the Union Cavalry, David Stanley. He's going to have a good day here. The Confederates managed to close in and capture that wagon train. And they make it all the way up to the Nashville Pike, which is the Union supply lifeline. But once they capture it, they realize they've bitten off more than they can chew. Because, you know, think about a 2-mile-long wagon train. What do you do with it? One of the Confederate troopers wrote, instead of burning it as we could have done, we tried to bring it off. We had ventured too far. We could not hold the prize and had to give up most of the wagons. So the Confederates tried to take these captured wagons and bring them back to their side, but they're not able to do that. And in the meantime, the Union cavalry counterattacks. The Union cavalry does really well here in Stones River, and General Stanley will personally lead a cavalry charge that recaptures a lot of the wagons and pushes the Confederates back. So on the edge of the battle, while the infantry is fighting, there's sort of a sideshow on the edge of the battlefield. It's really fascinating. But to get back to the main battlefield, this is about midday now. Two things are happening that I want to point out. By now, Union reinforcements are really starting to arrive, and they're starting to bolster the Union line and slow the Confederates down. That's happening right there in the middle part of the picture. They're in the deep woods. The other thing that's happening right along, take this out here. Can I use your gavel?
You may.
Right here, might be hard to make out, but that's General Hazen, William Hazen, commands the Union troops that are right there along the river. And they're in a wooded area called the Round Forest. And the Confederates start to attack Hazen. His position is really important because it anchors the whole Union Army. The Union Army starts there on the river and it extends to the west. It extends over to the left as you look at this slide. So Hazen has to hold his position or else everything collapses. The Confederates will launch 4 different attacks on Hazen's position, and each of them is repulsed. But in doing so, the Confederates bring some of their troops from the west side of the river, the east side of the river to the west side. So for those men who have to cross the river, it's December 31st, and they talk about crossing in that cold water and their pants get frozen, and then they have to go into battle. But the Confederates will launch 4 separate attacks. They just don't have enough men for any of those attacks. They're all made by small groups, and so all of those attacks will come up short. The commander of the 32nd Alabama wrote, "We charged within 50 yards of them, and had not the timely order to retreat been given, none of us would be left to tell the tale. Our regiment carried 280 into action and came out with 58. Now, the Confederates do get close, and they sometimes even get up into the Union line. There's hand-to-hand fighting. General Hazen's men are really hard-pressed. His commander tells him he might have to fall back. And Hazen says, "I'd like to know where the hell I'm supposed to fall back to," because he's got nowhere to go. One of the most interesting and something that we're not even really sure of this episodes here is going to be the attack of the 44th Mississippi. 44th Mississippi, a couple days before the battle, had a lot of illness. So the men were quarantined. They were separated from the rest of the army because they were contagious. And when that happened, they had their rifles taken away and distributed to other units because there was a shortage of good weapons. Well, when the men recover and rejoin the army, they're given what they call refuse weapons. They're given really bad, unusable rifles. Their commander wrote, many of these guns were worthless, some being bent, some the cocks could not be pulled down, some whose hammers had to be carried in the men's pockets until time to fire. Others were so foul as to render it impossible to ram home the charge. Many had no ramrods, and only one had a bayonet. He goes on to say that one half of the men moved out with no other resemblance to a gun than sticks as they could gather. So the 44th Mississippi makes a charge, apparently with half of the men carrying sticks. I've tried to verify this from other accounts. There's a lot of conflicting information. I have no doubt that they were badly armed. They had really poor weapons. Whether they really charged with just sticks, it's hard to say. But a few people write about it, so it might have happened. But at any rate, all these Confederate attacks against the Round Forest will start to come up short. Oops. There we go. And the Round Forest gets nicknamed Hell's Half Acre.